Hello, everybody, and welcome back to Empire Soccer Report. We are officially a stone's throw away from the 2026 Major League Soccer season. By the time you see this, it will be match day one. But for myself and Luca Richman of the RBNY experience, we are one sleep away. I'm James Birle. This is Empire Soccer Report. Last time I had Luca on, he was the first two-time guest in this show's history, and now he is the first three-time guest. Luca, how are you doing? I know the excitement. It's coursing through our veins right now. How are you feeling?
I'm doing well. I'm feeling great. Last time I was on here for my second time, I had a mustache that has since been shaved, and I'm very happy to be clean shaven now, which is great. And yeah, this is, the best time of the year. I think this is the longest off season that I can remember since I've been following the team, and so it definitely feels like there's been some time away, but still ultimately a short off season and one of the busier Red Bull off seasons. And so it all comes together tomorrow and just really excited to see it all unfold.
Yeah, we spent quite a bit of time talking about this off season, and it has felt long because it was the end of a 15-year run into the playoffs, of course. And uh, we don't have to harp on that too much because tomorrow's the start of a new beginning, the beginning of the Michael Bradley era, the beginning of the 2026 Major League Soccer season. And we kick things off in a good way on Wednesday, Luca, at Red Bull's Media Day. Before we get into any of the transfer news and the preview of the Orlando City match, which of course kicks off tomorrow night or tonight if you are watching or listening to this as it's published, what did you think of what I was clearly the biggest media day I've ever been part of? Over 100 reporters and media members at Sports Illustrated Stadium. We got to talk to a good number of players. Michael Bradley was there. Jorge Rubalcaba was introduced. What did you take away from the media day, Luca?
Yeah, I think the turnout was great. Last year, also a very promising turnout, but I think this year was even bigger, which is awesome. Definitely felt a very strong energy from Michael Bradley, who we've talked to numerous times throughout this offseason. And then hearing from Rubalcaba for the first time, he seemed pretty locked in and very grateful for the opportunity. Um and yeah, I think Michael Bradley, we're really starting to see the wheels turning. He's had a whole preseason under his belt, and so um, he has kind of a proof of concept of what he wants his team to look like.
Mhm.
And I think you could kind of see the gears turning a little bit in his head. For the rest of media day, I think it was just great to be at the stadium. Still a lot of construction happening at the stadium before the home opener in 10 days time or 8 days time now. Um, and whatever, things kind of still being pieced together, certain construction on the concourse and all around the stadium. There will be some updates there. We got to preview all the new food in the stadium with the new food provider Levy coming in. So yeah, if you're a fan listening and you're going to the games, be on the lookout for new concession items and things like that on opening day. But otherwise, in terms of the players we got to talk to, I think it was a good mix of, Chupo and Forsberg and those guys. But even hearing from Nehuan Benedetti and uh, Robert Volader, guys we haven't really talked to too much, Justin Che, Ethan Horvath, and seems like everyone's ready to go, and they're on their way to Orlando as we call.
Yeah, I had some good conversations with Cade Cowell and Justin Shea. Got to hear from George Ruvalcaba for the first time. I think pretty convinced now that he's going by George. At least that's how Michael
Yeah,
Bradley
it's
has
it's
referred
it's
to
weird.
him
Yeah.
and how Cade Cowell has. So um, we'll get official confirmation on that from him moving forward. But yeah, Media Day was a madhouse as it often is, but a huge thanks to the club, to Zach Leahy, to Andrew Visano, Luca Morello for hosting such a great event. I think in the future we'll keep our eyes on this when they build the training facility and that's completed. Andrew mentioned that that might be the destination for media days in the near future, which I
Mm-hmm.
think would be very, very exciting. But overall, always an exciting event and got to hear from some new faces and some familiar faces as well. I had a good conversation, good couple of questions in with Emil Forsberg. So a lot to take away. And my biggest takeaway is a couple things. I think that one, yes, the group is absolutely bought in under Michael Bradley. We heard Dylan Nealis say as much a few weeks ago at the training facility in East Hanover that he feels the direction of the team is very, very clear. Cade Cowell reiterated that. Emil Forsberg, in my discussion with him, he reiterated that as well. Um, the words he kept using was high intensity. So that brings me to my second point in that I don't think it's going to be as much of a departure from the energy drink soccer that we really think it is going to be. We thought that when Sandro Schwarz came in 2024, and in a way it was. They were more ball dominant than we had seen in years past. Noah Ayla at the center back position being a big part of that. But what the ultimate takeaway was in their most successful parts of the season at the very beginning and then at the very end in the playoffs, they kind of were willing to fight for second balls, fight for transition moments, be very, very aggressive on the counter, play a very high line, Red Bull as we've come to know it. And while I don't think it's necessarily going to look like the 2024 playoff run under Sandro Schwartz, I do think it's going to be less possession heavy. They will want to play with the ball. They will want to have these things, but it's going to be intense, direct, getting into the opposing opponent's half as quickly as possible. That's what Emil Forsberg dictated to me would be the philosophy, would be the identity of this team. You can check out some of those questions on this YouTube page or on my Twitter at jbirle9. But yeah, that was media day. Always exciting, always fun. And they changed the format a little bit, so we got to go into some deeper questions, I would say, with each of the players. So that was exciting. Some transfer news we have to get in before we preview the opening match. Red Bull New York 2 acquires Japanese defender Shunya Sakai on loan from RB Omiya Ardija. The Red Bull networks continuing this time out of Japan. They get a young 18-year-old center back on loan. And he said as much that he wants to be able to impress and be an option at the MLS level in the near future. It's only a 1 year loan for now, but we've seen these loans get extended pretty regularly. That move is pending his visa and registration approval. Luca, I think you mentioned before we started on air that this is the first ever move from Japan within the Red Bull network to New York.
Yeah, I believe it is, and I think it's an exciting, maybe new venture into potentially just the Asian market overall. I think maybe that's a bit of a stretch, but I'm just surmising based on the fact that Bragantino in Brazil has kind of been a source of some talent, not necessarily from Bragantino players, but kind of in the vicinity that maybe the Red Bull scouts across all the different Red Bull teams are kind of communicating and sharing their best practices. And maybe a young Brazilian kid might not be perfect in Bragantino, but could go to New York, or same thing with what the scouts are looking at in Japan. And so I think it's a positive little new chapter in the partnership. We'll see if there's any more talent on the way. But I definitely like the idea of Red Bull New York 2 really just loaning these guys and really trying them out. We've seen it's definitely quite a revolving door of a team if you have first teamers playing down or academy kids playing up. And so that mix under Dominic Wohlert this year, I think, is going to be really interesting to watch, especially because a lot of the Red Bulls 2 guys under Michael Bradley for their MLS Next Pro Cup run are kind of going to be big first team contributors in 2026.
Absolutely. And as you mentioned before, Michael Bradley got his first taste of preseason. Healthy to remember, he didn't even get that with Red Bulls too. He joined mid-season, taking over for our friend Ibrahim Sakai, and then did great things with them, ultimately winning the MLS Next Pro Cup. So an interesting season, an exciting one. A departing player we have to mention is Raheem Edwards is gone, was waived, bought out of his contract. It was hinted early or late last week, I should say, that he had left the Texas trip early and that Red Bull were going to buy him out of the contract. Early this week, that was announced, and shortly thereafter, a homecoming for the Ontario native. He's going to be playing at Toronto FC this season, so best of luck to Raheem Edwards. But it's another departure at left back following Marcelo Morales, his return to Universidad de Chile. It leaves Omar Valencia as the lone left back naturally. Of course, we know Jaquil Marshall-Ruddy can play some left back, and he may do just that this weekend against Orlando. But we've seen a lot of Matty Dos Santos as well in preseason, the 17-year-old from Connecticut, who was very good for Red Bulls too. Clearly, someone that Michael Bradley values. We'll see what his contract status looks like moving forward. Of course, you get, I believe, 6 loans from your MLS Next Pro side to MLS throughout the season. I think there's a real possibility that he gets a homegrown contract at some point eventually. Your thoughts on the Edwards departure, and do you think we'll see Matty Dos Santos this year?
Yeah, I think for Raheem Edwards, definitely an interesting case. I think he and Wiki Carmona were the two most scapegoated last season by fans, and so definitely it was a decision that pleased a lot of the fans. But ultimately, from a personnel perspective, I thought it was definitely surprising to get even thinner in defense at the 11th hour for the team. I think he contributed in 2025 as best he could, but really kind of faltered in a lot of moments where he needed to step up. And for whatever reason, last year Valencia, it was kind of a mystery why he started the season really strongly and starting at left back. Racked up 5 assists. I think was the fastest defender to 5 assists in club history, or some stat like that. And for whatever reason was kind of out of the squad through the end of the season, and Raheem Edwards took his place. But looks like Valencia is poised to have a big role this year. And as for Matty Dos Santos, I wouldn't be surprised either if he gets a homegrown contract. I was kind of maybe expecting, based on his appearances, that they would announce a contract today, which they did not do on Friday before the season. So yeah, I think what you're saying might be true. They might start with some short-term loans and maybe sneak in a contract before the end of the primary transfer window. And I was even thinking they might even throw a homegrown contract to Nate Worth in midfield, who was
Mhm.
contributing a little bit in preseason, not as heavily as Matty Dos Santos, but with midfield being a bit light, thinking he would maybe be a contributor. But definitely some hesitations. We know Marshall Ruddy will probably be playing there, as you said. Um, but I definitely expect there to be at least one more defensive move before the end of the transfer window on March 26th.
And we know as much. They are currently looking for that additional defender, going to be a center back. In my opinion, it should be someone who is starting quality, someone who is well established to a certain degree. We'll see if that's the route they go. A reminder, they've got two U22 initiative spots open. So they might do what their opponent on Saturday did and sign a young, up and coming, promising defender uh, in Iago Teodoro, who played from Flamengo and captain Brazilian youth national team sides. He's going to factor right in to Orlando City starting lineup, but we'll talk about that as we get closer to the end of the episode. You mentioned Nate Worth as well, who I think is definitely a candidate, someone who is capable of being a homegrown MLS player. He captained the reserve side in Panama at their preseason match against Tower FC, one of the top sides out of the Panamanian League. They've been to the CONCACAF Champions League before, and now the Champions Cup, of course. And they only narrowly lost 4-3 to a first flight Panamanian team. That's a good result for young kids for Red Bulls, too. Nate Worth did not travel with the first team, though. It is still with the second team. Matty Dos Santos, on the other hand, is with the first team. So I think just out of necessity in the position, he's inched his way up a little bit. And I think it's possible that he might have played Raheem Edwards out of a spot. They might have thought this
Yeah.
Dos Santos guy is really close enough to being within the first team long term. No need to have this MLS veteran here. Let's let him go someplace where he's going to be more valued, more comfortable in Toronto, a team that is building, really rebuilding, and potentially making a big splash with the signing of Josh Sargent. But that's neither here nor there for this show. Um, let's just do a quick overview of this offseason because it was a tumultuous one. It's as close to a rebuild as I think I've ever seen in Red Bulls terms. I mean, post 2019, said goodbye to guys like Luis Robles and Bradley Wright Phillips, and that felt like a change in direction. But so many holdovers from that team remained. Um,
hmm
Now it's been a little different. 11 departures, now 12 with Edwards, I believe. 7 players coming in, not including the young Red Bulls 2 guys that were signed at the end of last year, Rojas and Mosquera, but an ultimate changing of the guard. And of course, we know that Emil Forsberg and Eric Maxim Choupo-Moting are in contract years. They have options for the 2027 shortened season, excuse me. But as of now, this is their last year on the book. So we are on the precipice of a changing in the era. No more Lewis Morgan, no more Daniel Edelman, no more Sean Nealis, no more Noah Ayla, no more Peter Stroud, and several others. But that is a big crux of the team. I know Carlos Cornell, the big one there
Yeah.
as well.
Yeah.
So as we welcome in this new era, it may take some time, some growing pains. Fans may take some time to recognize some of the names here, but I think it's a welcome change, even if it isn't as successful from the get. I do believe that some change of direction needed to be made because it had been 7 straight seasons of okay with mediocrity. They did make that run to the 2024 MLS Cup, but as I've heard Dax McCarty say many, many times, and including on the Seeing Red podcast. Great interview, Mark, I must say. That was really the blip on the radar. That was the exception to the rule that they made that run. And it was a great, great run. Very, very exciting. A trip to MLS Cup. Nothing better than that, except for, of course, winning it. But it is time to make some changes, and we'll see what it looks like from start to finish on Saturday night. But Luca, your thoughts on having changed so dramatically in such a short, albeit a long off season in Red Bulls terms, but such a short off season in real time.
I think the main thing that I was hoping for this offseason was the proactivity from Julian de Guzman of not just signing players, but getting a lot of players out. And I think that was definitely achieved in terms of a lot of players that were contributing at a high level under Sandro Schwartz in terms of their minutes, but not necessarily in their goal contributions or anything really meaningful. If you look at the defensive side of the game, I'm thinking of guys like Alexander Hack, figuring out how to terminate his contract after being the third or fourth highest paid player on the roster, or guys, down the list that we felt like could have, a better attacking impact, like Wiki Carmona leaving, or in the case of Raheem Edwards for left back. Um, I think there were a lot of players that collectively, as a fan base, a lot of fans felt like it was time to move on from. And I think De Guzman did a lot of that very well and very productively. I think, again, there's still a month left in the transfer window, as a funny MLS quirk that it's all not aligned. Um, but if you really look at the incoming transfers, I believe it's only um, six or seven if you include Red Bull's two promotions. And yes, in there is a promising Cade Cowell signing, and there is George Ruvalcaba, who's young designated player, different type of DP profile than we've seen under the Sandro Schwartz era with Forsberg and Chupo, but and strengthening goalkeeper obviously with Ethan Horvath. But I think it definitely feels like central midfield um, and central defense is kind of thin, and even at left back, I guess.
Mm-hmm.
I think that's the main takeaway of the offseason is we have this um, we're seeing this group of kind of general defenders. Like they're wing backs naturally. They're not like a natural left back or right back, or like they could play center back. And there's a lot of just malleability kind of in the back line. And so I think that's something where um I'd like to feel like it's a little more defined in terms of the structures of having natural center backs, natural left backs, natural right backs. Um, but in a way, it also has the potential to make these players into more complete players if they're able to um, kind of move wherever they need to be. And I think we heard Justin Chase say that at media day. He was
Mm-hmm.
if he's asked to play goalkeeper, he'll step in. And so I think that mentality done right under Michael Bradley will help the defense really take root and be productive. Um, but that's definitely a main takeaway that we really saw twice as many departures as incoming signings for New York, and so there's still more time, obviously, and I think a lot of positive outgoing business. Even a guy like Victor Bogosh being loaned, Marcelo Morales being loaned, guys that maybe had higher ceiling, or the team thought they had higher ceilings than they did last year. But yeah, my main takeaway is positive to get a lot of players out, but still lacking in certain areas of the field, and I think we might see that as early as tonight against Orlando.
And to your point about the malleability of these defenders, I think that kind of speaks to the way Michael Bradley understands the game. Every time he had fielded a question about, hey, don't you need more center backs? Don't you need more defenders, more players in midfield? He kind of says, well, I don't see defense as being exclusively a
Yeah,
responsibility of the defenders. And
right.
any modern
Happens all over the
football
pitch.
and any modern football coach will tell you that that's the truth. While I do think they are rightfully looking for at least one more center back, and maybe we'll see if they bring in another midfielder or left back as well. Um, it doesn't surprise me that they've got guys who can play a number of different positions and can fulfill a number of different responsibilities, given that Michael Bradley is the one who's piecing it all together. When he speaks, it is so very deliberate, it is so very clear, and I think the team has valued that. And we will see again because we haven't been able to watch any matches what that looks like on paper from start to finish in a match that really matters. And Orlando is, I think, a perfect opponent to open up the season on the road. Tough environment to play in, warm weather, which I think they'll appreciate. But more importantly, it's a complete team that is honestly, in many, many ways, like Red Bull New York, often sneaks into the playoffs, often falls short in the playoffs, but is always there. You can always count on them to be a tough opponent. Of course, they did take the Open Cup in 2022. But having said that, it's a good opponent to have first in the opener of the season. And then, of course, they welcome New England Revolution, who I think is also a good test, a team that is probably going to be punching above their weight in 2025, in 2026. And that one kicks off at 2:30 on February the 28th, a week from today. So let's take a look at how the Red Bulls performed in preseason. Not that preseason really matters, but they played 6 matches. They won 2, they lost 4. Of their 4 matches against MLS opponents, they won 1 against St. Louis City, who are in something of a rebuilding year as well. They scored 15 goals and conceded 13, but really they scored 13 if you remember that the 2 goals they scored against FC Dallas were in that extra 45-minute period when they were already down 3-0. Julian Hall and Andy Rojas each had 3 goals. Cade Cowell had 5 assists. He may have had more against Sarasota, or excuse me, not against Sarasota, against Hartford Athletic, but I don't think we kept track of all the assists in that match. And of course, you compiled those statistics, Luca, so thank you for doing that. Um, Overall, the preseason showed what we kind of suspect about this team: free flowing attack. They'll score goals. They will struggle in defense, at least for now, until they figure things out back there. Um, Again, preseason doesn't matter, but I think we're going to be seeing more of the same in 2026. Luca, do you think that the preseason results were at all telling of what we're going to get in the regular season?
I think it's never 100% telling. I mean, if you remember last preseason, the club lost 6-0 to expansion side San Diego FC, and I think there was no result that necessarily indicated that. I
Mm-hmm.
even think back to 2023. I believe the Red Bulls won every single game of preseason
Yes, they did.
and then went to have one win in their first 10 matches. Gerhard Struber was let go, and so I think that season especially was the clearest contrast. I
Mm-hmm.
don't I don't know if this season will be as clear of a contrast. I don't necessarily think the team is gonna be winning decisively to start the season, but in a way I kind of like to think about the not necessarily the playing style being all that different, but kind of the personnel impacting the playing style kind of feeling a little different. Mainly just because thinking back the past 5, 6 years, it was always the Red Bulls attack is missing one or two pieces, but their defense is one of the best in the league. And we kind of saw that under Gerhard Struber. I remember Gerhard Struber saying a lot, like, I have no problem winning 1-0 and grinding out wins that way. And so I think if you're thinking of a more entertaining product and if preseason is a reflection of that, we might be getting that this season. Seeing the club maybe go 1 or 2 goals down and fighting back or vice versa. So definitely expecting more back and forth kind of contests, if you will, throughout the season, I think is something that we can kind of expect. Um, and also in a way natural if you know, if you're sticking with the high press and holding a high line and all that, but if you're open to kind of playing more possession based, if you're open to winning second balls, if you're open to being dangerous on the counter, um, I think it's going to kind of be a mix of all of it. But I definitely agree with you that like it's not going to be as insanely different as it has been, um, because I think the press has, as you said in the 2024 playoff run, obviously under a different manager, but um, reverting to kind of those principles um, helped them in that condensed period of time. And so I think um, what we saw under Red Bulls 2 under Michael Bradley. There will be a lot of elements of that, but it's not going to be an exact replica of what that team showed in their playoff run last year to MLS Next Pro Cup.
And I think it's definitely not going to be as much of a deviation as maybe we originally thought. But I think you make a great point that it is a difference in terms of how the roster has been set up in previous seasons for sure. Do I think that the Red Bulls are going to sneak 1-0 wins past teams anymore? No, I think we're going to see maybe some 3-2 games, some 4-3s, some 3-3s, some 3-0s if the
Yeah.
shooting boots don't come, and they could be on either side of those results. And I think the first match against Orlando is going to be a great example because while I do think Orlando, when it's fully healthy, have a pretty strong back four, they're not going to be fully healthy. They'll be without their captain, Robin Janssen. They just this week picked up Griffin Dorsey from Houston Dynamo. They were desperately in need of a right back after Alex Freeman was poached by Villarreal. They were using Ivan Angulo there through preseason, and it didn't look like a recipe for success. And I think Cade Cowell, who's been playing off the left, was licking his chops at the opportunity of having that vacated space to run into. Well, that probably won't be the case anymore because they're going to have a natural right back there. So with that said, before we really get into the weeds and preview this match, the arrivals. We've talked about the players departing. Cade Cowell, Ruvalcaba, Robbie Volader, Jaquil Marshall-Ruddy. Those guys, we think could be inserted right into the starting 11. And of course, Ethan Horvath, the goalkeeper. Maybe not the most promising of goalkeeping from the preseason play. I do think Horvath will need some time to adjust to being back into the starting role at the club. It's been a little while since he's been trusted with one wholeheartedly. And I think that's going to help him. I think at his best, he can be, a top keeper in the league, but we've seen in his career at least being forced out of the position multiple times. I'm not sure his confidence level is as good as it's been in years past. But this is a guy who has started in the Champions League for Club Brugge, has won the Belgian league, multiple times, both as a starter and as a number two to Simon Mignolet. So this is a talented goalkeeper. As for Volader, I think he's a like for like replacement for Noah Ayla as a ball playing center back on the left side of the center defense. But is he as good as Noah Ayla? Probably not. I mean, he only played 18 matches last year at Sporting KC because of an injury, and was forced out of that team. That is going to be a dumpster fire again in 2026. But they've gotten rid of, I believe, as many as 12 players, and now 13 with Daniel Shalloy going to Toronto FC. So maybe I can't. Wouldn't be fair to hold that against him, but he didn't look great in the one clip of a goal we saw FC Dallas score. Again, to take things away from preseason is difficult to do, but I expect him to be a potential starter at the left side of center back. And of course, the wingers, Ruvalcaba and Cowell, are going to be starting as many games as possible this year. And we'll see if Forsberg and Choupo-Moting can keep up their legs in the way that they did in 2025, which surprised a lot of folks. So before we talk about the match and we look at each of the starting lineups respectively, just bring us up to speed if you can, Luca, on what to expect from new guys like Cowell, Bakaba, Volader, and Marshall-Ruddy, who and Horvath again. I keep forgetting him, who can factor into the starting lineup right away.
One thing I'm thinking of, especially for, I guess you could say, obviously Horvath and Cade Cowell, but also Jaquil Marshall-Ruddy for Canada, is thinking about
Mm-hmm.
these guys in a World Cup year, these young guys who are kind of on the fringe of their respective national teams. I think mainly like Cowell and Horvath definitely on the fringe, and so um, maybe it's kind of a not a concrete thing to base anything on, but thinking about these guys in a World Cup year in the sprint of the first half of the MLS season to get on Mauricio Pochettino's good side for the US 17, thinking if one of Matt Freese or Matt Turner go down with an injury, God forbid, of course, but that opens the door for a guy like Ethan Horvath to step in and be the third string keeper potentially, um, under maybe guys like Schulte or Celentano or what have you. But same thing with Cade Cowell too. Thinking of guys who have kind of made this move with the year of the World Cup in mind. I don't think Cowell said at media day that it had anything to do with it, but I'd like to think that um, you want to try to make a statement at a new club, We've seen that Pochettino has his eyes on MLS very consistently, and so I'd like to think that is a factor that's inspiring these guys to be very hungry as new signings. But what I definitely think is it's kind of a transition season of you're seeing the older veterans like Choupo-Moting and Emil Forsberg kind of bringing these guys under their wing. And I'm kind of seeing it as like expecting it's their last year, and the team is really going to skew a lot younger after this season. And so expecting a lot of these young guys to, not necessarily have everything figured out. A lot of prospects, a lot of what ifs on a lot of these guys if they're going to hit or not. But you'd like to have faith in a guy like Michael Bradley too, who is again young and hungry in his first real head coaching job and at this high level. And I think that it's definitely going to be a transition of how he is developing these guys throughout the entire season. I think there'll clearly be an arc for a lot of these new signings from where they are now until the end of the season. Um, and really hoping to see guys take a lot of big jumps with yeah, with the World Cup in mind, and just with the fact that a lot of these guys are really proving to make a statement coming to a new team. Even like a guy like Robbie Voloder, who wouldn't even have any sniff at anything at the German national team. Um, him being on a Sporting Kansas City team that was kind of, on a downward spiral, and him leaving that project and coming to New York. It's a breath of fresh air for a lot of these guys. Weren't necessarily contributing at high levels on teams that were doing so successfully well, but I think it's that next step for a lot of these guys to maybe get out of projects and different situations where they weren't the focal point, and to kind of get into the spotlight and really show their qualities and perform at a high level.
And another thing I'll mention, speaking with Jorge Ruvalcaba, I loved his answer when I asked him about what it would be like to play with Cowell and Choupo-Moting and how that's been going. He mentioned as well that how excited he is to do that, but that there are so many talented young players that are in this squad that can really make a difference. Guys like Andy Rojas and Rafael Mosquera, of course, Cam Harper, once he's fully healthy, will be an option both off the bench on the wing and at right back potentially as a starter. Mohamed Sofo, I think he's picked up a knock, but we'll see what his impact looks like moving forward. Um, I think that's absolutely we can't lose sight of that because while Ruvalcaba and Cowell have been brought in to be starters, of course, Rojas and Mosquera carried the load in a brilliant way for Red Bulls too. Mohamed Sofo had a very good start to the season, but then kind of began to be asked more than he should have been as a regular in and out starter for most of the 2025 season. And then Harper, a player who needs to recover from injury, but like there is considerable depth in the front line of this team that I think will be very, very interesting to watch and should bode well. Fans should be excited about it. And then, of course, at the striker position with the loan move for Bogosh, that opens the door for a guy like Julian Hall to really stake his claim and make a splash in MLS in a way that the 18-year-old just hasn't really done yet, hasn't really had the opportunity to do. We've seen flashes of his brilliance. I think back to that goal against Monterrey in Leagues Cup where he absolutely torched Sergio Ramos. More moments like that, I think, will be not only great for him and the club and potentially forcing a move to Europe for him somewhere down the line, but for the team in general, if they can tap into his potential, I mean, that'll be a very, very welcome addition. And again, I say addition, not that he's a new player, but in that he just hasn't been given these opportunities in a way before. The fact that some literal children can be looked at as a stepping stone, I think, doesn't always bode well for success in that very given season. But this is a project under Michael Bradley. I said as much last week with Zach Feldman, and I really do believe that. I think that it may not be all polished in 2026, but guys like Audrey Mehmeti, Noen Benedetti, Rojas, Mosquera, Julian Hall, and even Rold Mitchell, who looked great for Red Bulls 2 down the stretch last year. I think those guys eventually will make their jumps. Maybe not all of them, and maybe not all as big splashes as the others. But I do think that these are things that we, as content creators, as media people, as fans, of course, at the end of the day, of course, we're fans, should be keen to keep our eye on. Now, with that said, first match of the season, first official match preview on this show. Let's start with Orlando City because they are the visitor or they are the home side, but they are the opposition through our lens. We know a little bit about the Red Bulls. Let's talk about Orlando City. Um, like I said, a perennial playoff candidate in the Eastern Conference. I think with the way that the league has just been strengthening, probably not going to be in the upper echelon of the Eastern Conference, but still, I think a playoff team and one that has a pretty decent starting 11 and some depth as well to make note of. They lost Pedro Gallese in goal, but they welcomed in Maxime Crepeau, so not a big drop off there. They lost Alex Freeman, but they've got Griffin Dorsey. Robin Janssen will be injured, but they brought in Yago to be a holdover at center back now. I think he'll be a great piece for them for a while before he eventually gets poached by a European side that wants to pay the big bucks. So it looks like David Brekalo is probably going to start at center back next to him instead of Janssen. Adrian Marine at left back, who is was once at Villarreal, a good Spanish player. And then I think they have one of the better pivots in central midfield in Wilder Cartagena and Eduardo Tuesta. Of course, a big South American contingent, as there often is under Oscar Pareja. The mid and the front four, I think, is dangerous as well. Marco Pasalic on the right wing, Angulo, who we aforementioned, played a lot of right back in preseason. He's going to be in his natural position on the left wing. Martino Hayda at the 10 position. And then up top, they said goodbye to DP Luis Muriel, who was kind of a bit of a bust in Major League Soccer, and Duncan Maguire, who a couple years removed from a really big splash as a domestic striker, got a chance with the national team. He'll probably be the starter for a short time until they find that Luis Muriel replacement. I think they still have a DP spot open. They used all their U22 spots this offseason on young Brazilian players, as they often look in that region of the world. But this is a very strong starting 11 for MLS terms. Do I think it's the best in the Eastern Conference? Probably not, but that they're going to have a stability in midfield. They have a good enough defense to weather the storm before Janssen returns from injury. Crepeau is a bit of a downgrade from Gallese, but not much at all. And then Duncan Maguire, a serviceable striker for sure. Do I think he'll be the long-term starting striker? Probably not, but he's a guy who can score goals in this league. We know that much. Ojeda had 20 goals in all competitions last year, and Pasalic had 15. So between the two of them, and this is not including assists, 35 goals between them. This is a dangerous team. They've got Tyrese Spicer off the bench as well. They've got Brian Ojeda as an option in central midfield off the bench. This is a strong, deep team in this league for sure. And I think they're going to put up a good fight against the Red Bulls. I think they're strongest, of course, on the wings and in attacking midfield, where they could do a lot of damage. The Red Bulls defense going to get tested early here, Luca.
Red Bulls defense definitely gonna get tested, and I think this is a case of both offenses kind of being stronger than defenses, and so I'd be surprised if this is low scoring. I think it would just be a fun start to the season, um, from a perspective of making a bit of a statement if there can be some 3-2 win or some type of result in there before the home opener in a week. Um, I think Duncan McGuire feels like a player who has a lot to still kind of prove, even though he has been that guy in the past. I think him having the spotlight to start the season could be a little boost that he needs in the absence of Luis Muriel. And yeah, as you mentioned, Martino Ojeda really orchestrating their attack and Paslesh being really dangerous. And so I think it really is a good first test. One interesting little piece of information that Michael Bradley shared, based on a question I actually asked him midweek at Media Day, was that a lot of the substitutes he was making in these preseason games were kind of preordained in a way. And I was actually
Mm-hmm.
surprised to learn that as something that I didn't really know managers were kind of doing. And so it kind of made me think he wasn't necessarily um, looking at the performance of each preseason game, or at least, the first half, and making substitutes based on that. He was just thinking of how to give guys minutes based on what he has decided as his first half lineup. And as we saw a lot in preseason, an entirely different second half lineup. So we'll see kind of for the first time him really making these real time substitute decisions. And I think that'll be really interesting to gauge from the jump. And also, as you were saying, this is one of the first preseasons in a while where we haven't seen any preseason content in terms of any actual full 90-minute coverage of how the team is setting up. And so I think it'll really be the first time we just see a lot of this interplay play out on the pitch. is Emil Forsberg going to be higher up, more off to the left? We don't exactly know how the midfield three is going to be fully set up. We have, the idea, obviously. Um, and Forsberg obviously playing a bit of a different role this year. But I think yeah, as you mentioned, a good first test where it's not, a giant in the East, but definitely a very, very deep team that can really cause problems for the Red Bulls defense, and might be a good starting litmus test to set the tone for 2026.
Yeah. I think we'll see what the midfield setup looks like. The thought of Martin Ojeda running at this center of defense with the options of Pasalic and Angulo to the side of him, a little bit scary to start the season. Gustav Berggren, I thought, left a little bit to be desired last season. I mean, short introduction, and he only had so much time to acclimate with the group. But defensively, I think there were sometimes I wanted to see more from him. And I think Ojeda, if he can find pockets in between Berggren and Ronald Donkor, who we suspect will start as well, I think there could be a real undoing of the Red Bulls back line. We saw Guilherme of Houston Dynamo score three wildly different goals in that Houston
Mhm.
Dynamo game.
Mhm.
Scored a long shot, scored a free kick that went through traffic, and scored a penalty. So a couple of different ways to beat this Red Bulls team. We saw them get beat a lot with early long balls against FC Dallas in the clips of those goals. Um, and again, Angulo is a guy with a lot of pace who can really do some damage. We'll see if that's something that they try to do, depending on who starts at right back for the Red Bulls. I've got a mock up of a potential starting 11. I know you have one too. I think we only had one discrepancy between the two of us. Horvath in goal. I think Marshall Ruddy at right back, Justin Che and Robbie Volader center backs, Omar Valencia left back, Berggren, Donkor, and Forsberg the midfield three. I tried to coax a little bit of information out of Forsberg to see if he was going to be playing a little deeper, like we suspect. He didn't really answer that, but did mention that he's been had his role communicated to him clearly, and he's willing to do what he can to help the team. And then the front three from right to left: Cowell, Choupo-Moting, and Ruvalcaba. Cade Cowell said as much that he's not used to playing off the right; he's used to playing exclusively as a left winger, cutting inside to his right. But I think harnessing his speed and getting him to find crossing opportunities for Choupo-Moting is something that makes a lot of sense. And if Ruvalcaba or Forsberg are arriving late, I think that plays to their strengths as well. So seeing that as the starting 11, potentially maybe we see Dylan Nealis at center back and Che at right back, or Marshall Ruddy at left back. Maybe Parker starts in the center of defense. But I think the midfield and forwards, we know what we're going to see. And of course, Horvath
Mhm.
will be the starting goalkeeper. Um, Again, not a fully finished product. We think they're going to add another center back. Maybe in midfield, maybe at left back. We think that they still could use some work, but it's about 80 to 85% of a constructed roster here, Luca. Let's do some score predictions. This is the start of it. We haven't seen this team play. We didn't get the My Nine coverage of the Coachella Valley Invitational
Mine,
like
I, yeah.
we're used to. But your thoughts? You said you think there's going to be goals in this one. I agree. Let's hear your prediction first.
I'm gonna go 2-2. Just thinking the growing pains of the side, I don't see them taking away a win in the first game of the season. They didn't have any draws in preseason. But I'd like to think that um I'd like to think that the defense and Ethan Horvath have really started to settle in. We've seen their vulnerabilities, like you mentioned, long balls over the top and things like that. And so um, there'll definitely be a few scary chances, or maybe more than a few scary chances on the receiving end for the Red Bulls. But I'm really optimistic about the front three just really starting to connect, and we saw it a bit in preseason, and even Julian Hall coming in and being the joint leading goal scorer in preseason, him having an impact off the bench. Um, I think there's real potential here to um, just be more of an offensively minded game. Would be surprised if it's low scoring,
Mm-hmm.
but don't think the Red Bulls have the edge right now to really pull off any type of um, decisive or narrow win for that matter.
I'm going to go a 3-2 victory for Orlando City. I think it's going to be an even game. I think we're going to see a lot of chances, but I'm reminiscent of that 2024 season opener where the Red Bulls controlled that game, and then an unfortunate mishap from Noah Ayla on the road in Orlando That was an
Mhm.
early season game. I think was that maybe the first game of the season, or maybe it was the first away game. Either way, a late goal decided that one. That's how I
Yeah.
see this one. I think Ruvalcaba 1v1 against Griffin Dorsey. I like his chances there because Dorsey, we know, is a player who likes to bomb forward, a more responsible defender than Angulo. I think Cade Cowell's pace, could take advantage of a player like Marine, who is more ball dominant fullback. And I think Choupo-Moting is going to get a goal in this one. I really do. I mean, he's a class player. You just the instincts that he has and his ability to sniff out chances and put them away. It's not something the Red Bulls have had since Bradley Wright Phillips. His 17 goals last season were a very, very welcome surprise for the DP striker. I do think it'll be a tough game defensively for the Red Bulls. I think they'll get picked apart sometimes in transition, but I think they kind of have to go through that to learn. I do agree that they're probably settling in more than we've seen at this point. We don't know what the starting back four is going to be. We've seen a number of different ones in preseason. Um, and I'm not sure that the one I just put on your screen, if you're watching on YouTube, is the accurate starting back four. It's just a projection. It could be a number of different things, but either way, I do think that they will have to learn through these moments, and they'll continue to do that as the season starts. I don't want to discourage people by saying I think they're going to open the season with a loss, especially since they're unbeaten in their last 5 games against Orlando. I think they have an even record going down to Orlando as well: 5 wins, 5 losses, and a handful of draws. But this is a tough opponent to open up the season with. I think they're going to learn more at the end of the weekend than we think, and they're going to bring some confidence into the game against the New England Revolution the following week. So, with that said, that's a look into the matchup against Orlando. Predicted starting lineups, predicted outcome. Let's look at the season at large. I've got a list of awards in front of me and some winners, some trophy winners. Um, we're going to focus on just MLS right now. No Open Cup, no Leagues Cup, no CONCACAF. Just the award winners in MLS and the trophy winners. Supporters Shield, MLS Cup, MVP, Golden Boot, and maybe we'll do a couple fun ones. Goalkeeper of the Year, and yeah, we'll stop it there. Don't need to do Defender of the Year because we know it's not going to be a Red Bull. That much is true. So with that said, my Supporters Shield winner, I'm going to take the easy answer here, and I'm going to say Inter Miami. The team has just been no team has been able to construct their roster in MLS history the way that they have. And I know people have been saying, well, they're breaking rules here and there, a million DPs. I'm not sure if I'm buying all that. I think it just so happens they have this guy named Lionel Messi, and a lot of people are attracted to the project that they're doing because of him. And that is not a surprise, considering there is no player in the history of football like Lionel Messi. So I'm going to go for Inter Miami as a supporter shield. And if I were talking about the CONCACAF Champions Cup, I think they're the favorite to take that as well. But just focusing on the supporter shield, even if Messi is going to be out for the first few weeks of the season, they're going to have enough cover to be a really scary team. They're going to bring even some of the best players in the league off the bench regularly. So Miami supporter shield, even if they have some injured legs here.
Yeah, I think I tend to agree, and maybe this is going to be a boring round of predictions. I feel like across the board of MLS pundits this year, it's like, should we even make predictions? Um, no, yeah, I mean, totally agree. It's crazy to think about a team like that losing Jordi Alba and Sergio Busquets in one offseason, two DPs, and then feeling like the team has kind of upgraded, mainly because their defense has just gotten so much more reliable and
Well
bringing in
rounded.
well-rounded.
Yeah.
Bringing in a goalkeeper of the year in Dane St. Clair, I think just really helps them a lot. So yeah, I think last season we saw a few lapses, and that's kind of what led Philly, who were so much more consistent, to really win the Shield, as the Shield is all about consistency over 34 games. Um, but yeah, I think with the defensive additions they brought in, and you bring in Bertarame as a designated player,
Mhm.
definitely a DP, kind of more in um, his prime, late prime, not really past prime from Europe. I think yeah, we have to agree on this one for Supporter Shield for sure.
I mean, they bring Mikael as well to play center back, Sergio
Yep,
Reguilon, a full
Reguilon,
season
yep,
of Rodrigo de Paul. Like, the team is ridiculous for
yep.
this league. And uh, that brings us to MLS Cup. And I'm going to be a little different here because I think there's a team on the West Coast that is probably not as good, but if not for Inter Miami's existence, I think would also be one of the greatest teams ever concocted in MLS history. And of course, I'm talking about Los Angeles FC. I think Son is going to be a full season of Son is going to be something we've never seen before, with the exception of Lionel Messi. I think Denny Bouanga and Messi is the greatest 1-2 punch in MLS besides Messi and whoever's playing next to him. Um, and while I do think Vancouver are going to be good again, San Diego, FC Cincinnati, a full season of this LAFC team is something that is going to be a spectacle. I think LAFC is going to run away with the West. I think Inter Miami is going to run away with the East. And there are so many other really good teams in that category, but those two specifically are head and shoulders above the other. And I think in a final, if LAFC, even if they're on the road, because of course the Supporter Shield winner would host a final, assuming it's LAFC versus Inter Miami, um, I think LAFC might have the juice to win it in the final. And I love their midfield. I think bringing in Steven Eustachio while Igor Jesus is out injured for the time being. I mean, he's my pick for newcomer of the year. Not that we're going to go through that, but he is a quality midfielder. I mean, put him next to Igor Jesus when he's back healthy, Timothy Tillman. That is quite a strong lineup, and I think that they will win MLS Cup.
Yeah, I think honestly, yeah, I would not. I'm not agreeing in my pick because I have a different kind of pick that
Mm.
might be slightly out of left field a little bit. Um, but we're actually seeing that matchup on Saturday Night Soccer tonight, or Saturday
Yep.
Showdown rather, as MLS is calling it. LAFC hosting Inter Miami at the LA Coliseum. So could that be the final game of the season? And we're seeing it on opening night for the season in February. Yeah, I mean a full season with Sung Heung-min uh and the Denny Bouanga connection uh was something to really behold last year, and that's obviously going to continue, and you have the whole preseason to really gel all of it. Um Reminder of Red Bull New York's old friend Aaron Long being a part of that team would be a crazy season for him to be a part of. Um, I'm gonna go for like a rogue pick because, as always, MLS Cup is very unpredictable. I'm
Yep.
gonna throw Nashville into the mix just because
Yeah.
of their front three with Hani Mukhtar, Sam Surridge, and now Christian Espinoza from San Jose. Um, think they were consistently dangerous last year, but have only really upgraded in their attack. And I think it's funny you've seen a lot of uh, not comparisons, but because Nashville and Miami kept meeting in all these different competitions, I think there's a comparison that like if there were to be a team to finally beat Miami, it would likely be Nashville in the playoffs, finally like kind of taking a bit of a jump, and being able to hold Miami to 3 games in round one of the playoffs last year. And so I think they've only really kind of improved, and I think they, with their Open Cup win. In 2025 they've had a taste of tournament football, um and really what it takes to definitely a weaker field of opponents in the Open Cup, but having that experience and having that championship winning memory and just recent memory, I think is going to carry them far this year, and they've only upgraded their attack, and I think definitely one to watch in the East for sure.
And now for Golden Boot, I'm going to stick with LAFC here. I'm going to go with Son Heung-min, and the reason I'm not going with Lionel Messi is because I think Son's just going to play in more matches, and he might score in every single one of them. I mean, we saw, admittedly, against Real España, who are one of the better teams in Honduras, but the level between them and LAFC is pretty significant. That 4 or 5 pronged attack, obviously, it mainly goes through Son and Boanga, but they were just relentless. And we did see a similar goal, to your credit, in Nashville, where Mukhtar played Espinoza in, and he had the patience to find Sam Surridge. And they didn't even BJ Callahan, I think, is a fantastic coach, and they didn't even start with those 3 guys at the start of the match. They were willing to suffer and then bring those guys in and close things out. So I absolutely agree with your assessment that Nashville are going to take a jump. I think they're a top 4 candidate in the East for sure. I think they'll be one to watch. It feels like for a while they were like stuck with having like a 2-man attack and needed a third guy, and were able to pick up Espinoza from San Jose in a great move. So Nashville, I think, are right up there as well. And then just I'll do these two back to back because I think it's definitely between these two guys. I have Son for the Golden Boot, but I'm going to go with Messi for the MVP. Um,
Mhm.
he's going to three-peat. It's Lionel Messi. he won't have the goals that Son will have, but he's playing deeper in midfield anyway. It seems underneath Bertarame, so I think he's going to be dishing out assists like candy, and he will be my MVP pick. And I think the league will be very happy about that if he is indeed the MVP.
Yeah, I think to keep it boring, I'm gonna agree with you on both of these because
Hmm.
um I think just the way Miami's set up and we saw through the playoffs, you bring back Tadeo Allende too, who was insane in the playoffs and I think had the most goals in a single postseason of
Hmm.
in MLS history. And so yeah, if Messi's playing a bit deeper, if you're bringing a powerhouse attacking signing like Bertarame, a lot of the goal scoring pressure is not going to fall on Messi. Will he still score double digit, maybe even 20 plus goals? Absolutely, but it feels like um, there isn't necessarily a duo at Inter Miami where there really is at LAFC with Son and Bouanga, and I think those two guys just really are going to play off each other really well, and Son already scoring in Champions Cup and assisting, and so. Yeah, MVP would be kind of tight. It really just seems like it's between those two. Really a two-horse race for MVP there. Um, and yeah, you can't really think of anyone else that would like, you maybe throw in Thomas Muller in the mix if he has a full season in Vancouver as well, but even then I feel like it's not that close.
I think
James
maybe
Rodriguez I think won't even have as an
no.
advanced role as people are maybe hyping up just thinking of all the big names here, but yeah, probably a
I think
two-horse race.
just thinking of an old friend in Brian White as a potential Golden Boot candidate. Do I think he'll
Yeah.
score more goals than Son or Messi? No, and to put him in the same category as those two guys just feels like a silly thing to say out loud. But if he's going to be getting service from Sabi and Kubas and Berhalter and Thomas Mueller for the whole season, like he's going to score loads of goals. And um, if I can think, if Josh Sargent completes that move and has a full
Mhm.
season, like I think he's got 20 goals in him as well. So I mean, there's and of course there's a ton others that I'm not mentioning here, but
Mhm.
I mean those are just the quick ones that came to my head. Of course, our old friend Brian
Yeah.
White, Hunterdon Central, high school legend,
Flemington.
Flemington, New Jersey boy. And we'll finish with goalkeeper of the year. We don't have to do defender, newcomer, coach, young player, comeback, whatever.
Mhm.
Goalkeeper of the year. I'm going to pick a villain and I'm going to say Matt Freeze just because I think he's
Mhm.
been overlooked each of the last two seasons. And if he can stay healthy, the U.S. job at the World Cup is going to be his. He signed that huge contract through 2030. I do not think he will be in MLS for the duration of that contract. I think he's going to make a jump to Europe eventually.
Mhm.
And I think people will point to 2026 and maybe 2027. I think he'll stay for the stadium year. Um, as a big reason why he makes that jump. I think he was just as good as Dane St. Clair. And I think the removal of a Justin Hack in front of him is going to force him to keep NYCFC in games, especially because they also are missing a striker in Alonso Martinez with his injury. I think the goalkeeping is going to end up being that much more important for NYCFC. So I'm picking Matt Freeze. And I know that's not the one that Red Bulls fans will love to hear, but he has been that good and he deserves his plaudits.
Yeah, I mean, and I agree too. And I think NYCFC is consistently slept on, and they've consistently proven that they are able to do so much with sometimes what feels like so little. And then this is kind of another case of that this season. And yeah, he really is the centerpiece of that team. I mean, um, even like another season-long injury to a guy like Andres Perea, who,
Mm-hmm.
obviously they have Nico Fernandez Marcao and their midfield is definitely solid in terms of um, where they're going. But yeah, losing Hack in defense and you know, um, I think people are hopeful that Seymour Reed's going to take a jump in attack, but yeah, I think Matt Freeze is really going to be the guy to be the centerpiece of that team. You only really win an award that's not fully numbers based if your team is really performing well. And so I
Yep.
don't think you win goalkeeper of the year unless this team is a top, you know, 5, 6 team in the East. Contrasting to a guy like Christian Benteke who won Golden Boot in 2024, even when his team missed the playoffs. Um, but yeah, I think Matt Freeze again in a World Cup year. gonna really want to be hungry to perform at a high level, and if he stays healthy, I think yeah, he runs away with it, and he not to take anything away from a guy like Dane St. Clair at Miami, because
Mhm.
you're thinking Miami's probably going to top the East, and so if he's the keeper, part of that side, he has a big shout, but I just think the momentum for Freeze for sure is definitely there, and should rise to the top for sure.
All right. Now that brings us to our final bit of predicting of the episode, and we're going to take a look at where Red Bull New York fits in the Eastern Conference, in this loaded Eastern Conference. We've talked so many times now in just the last few weeks about how much better each of these top teams are getting. Nashville, Miami, of course, Cincinnati, Charlotte. I think Chicago Fire taking a jump. The Crew are going to be good again. NYCFC, despite being without Alonso Martinez, are still a quality team. The Union are coming off of the Supporter Shield season. Orlando City have, shored out their defensive issues, bringing in Griffin Dorsey. I think they're going to be good. Atlanta United, we don't know what they're going to be, right? But on
Atlanta's
paper,
always the one where it's like this will be the year under Tata Martino, like it's all aligning. They'll be a
I
powerhouse
know.
again.
But
Yeah.
on paper, they could be, right? Like
They
they
could be
absolutely
exactly.
could. I think New England are going to be better than they were. I
Yep.
think if Toronto FC can finalize this Josh Sargent signing, I think they're maybe not a playoff team, but certainly taking the jump. I look around the entire Eastern Conference, and every team not named CF Montreal, I think, can take a jump this year. And then I look at the West, and I think just about the same thing. Every team that's not named Sporting KC, and maybe not St. Louis City, because while they still have some quality players in that team, they still feel like they're maybe in a rebuilding mode, and maybe the Rapids as well can go in that category. But between 28 Major League Soccer teams not named Sporting KC and CF Montreal, every team's got a chance to be in the mix here. So I won't even say wooden spoon because I believe it's between those two. Um, but where do you think Red Bull New York finishes this year? Are they going back to the playoffs in 2026?
I think I think they're going back to the playoffs, but I think it's going to be the playing game. It's going to be either 8 or 9. I think initially I was thinking the season's either going to be an overperforming season or, a complete dumpster fire. But I think it's kind of going to be middle of the road again, just because, they filled all their DP spots. The attack is promising. We think Chupo's going to be as productive as he was last year, and you like to think you improved in certain areas of the pitch, but I think you just take a look at the rest of the East and how stacked it is, and how all these other teams have developed. And I don't see this Red Bulls team fitting into the top echelon of that, even like the middle echelon of playoff teams. If you're really looking at like the 5 to 6 range, or 5 to 7 range rather in the East. Um, I think it's going to be scrapping for eighth or ninth, and that's something that the Red Bulls have seen pretty much consistently since 2021, besides the outlier season in 2020 where they finished top four. Since then it's been, you know, seventh and lower pretty much. And I think while this Michael Bradley project has a lot of momentum, this is not the year to think it's all going to click instantly and this team is going to be back to, top five team in the East. And so, yeah, it pains me to say it a little bit because I think everyone wants the immediate instant gratification, and especially because we offloaded so many of the players that missed the playoffs. Um, but I think ultimately for New York, it's going to be another um, fight to get in, and I think it's something that a lot of these players um, will, you know, feel. I think they'll really feel the tenacity of Michael Bradley as a young guy wanting to really set this team up for success. Um, and I don't think Michael Bradley's going to settle for missing the playoffs in his first year with his standards. But really overall, still kind of a question mark. But I'm really going and playing spots 8 or 9 for me.
I think if they are going to be a playoff team, that is their spot. Last year, Orlando City and the Chicago Fire tied for eighth and ninth on 53 points. If
Hmm.
I look at the Red Bulls team right now, do I think they're a 50-point team? I'm not so sure.
Hmm.
And I look at the teams that they're going to be playing home and away in the Eastern Conference this year. Are they going to be able to beat these teams and win 15 or 16 matches? I'm not so sure. I have my doubts about that. I do think they'll bring in another center back, But after that, I'm not so sure that even they're going to have the
Hmm.
foundation to be better than a lot of these teams. I listed 9 teams off the dome that
Hmm.
are already increasingly getting better. And while I think like a team like Orlando was only just good enough to make the playoffs last year, did they get better in the center defense? Yes, but are they more or less the same in other areas? And I think that they're kind of in the same position the Red Bulls were last year, where yes, they were good enough, but if you look around the league, they didn't do enough to match their adversaries and get that much better to the point where I think that they're probably also going to be in that play in spot. I think Columbus um, probably going to feel the post Wilfred Nancy
Hmm.
era hit them a little bit harder, but they were kind of in the same boat as they were in 2025. I think that they're not going to make much jumps. I don't think they're going to get much worse. I think they're going to be around the play-in spot. I think if people expect the Chicago Fire to take the jump that they did last year and increase on that, well then there's your team in the 5 to 7 range. NYCFC, same thing. Philly Union, I think will maybe take a step back, but they're still going to be there. Charlotte, excuse me, is still going to be there. They're going to have now another season of Wilfred Zaha. Nashville are taking a jump. Cincinnati aren't going anywhere. Miami, I just don't see room for the Red Bulls to be a playoff team this year. But that's okay because it's this year. I know not making the playoffs, that's not the standard. I'm not saying that that's okay, but this is a project that is going to exist beyond 2026. And if this is to be the last season of Emil Forsberg and Eric Maxim Choupo-Moting, we'll see what Michael Bradley and Julian de Guzman want in designated
Hmm.
players. We know
Hmm.
George Ruvalcaba won't be a designated player in 2027, most likely. We don't know for
Hmm.
sure, but most likely. His transfer fee is what makes him a DP in this season. So I think we're going to see not a hard reset next year like we've seen this year, but an additional one ahead of 2027, ahead of the 2027-28 full season. Of course, we're having that weird 14-game season in the spring of next year. So for me, I've got Red Bull New York in 11th
Hmm.
in the Eastern Conference. I think they'll be more or less the same as they were on points a year ago. I think some things will be frustrating. I think they'll be better than they were on the road. I think, and if they can steal points on the road, they'll
Hmm.
be in the playoff discussion. I don't think it's out of the realm of possibility that they sneak into ninth, eighth, maybe even seventh. But for now, I've got them in 11th. If they just win 2 or 3 more matches on the road than they did last year, they'd be a playoff team. And I think
Hmm.
that's more or less where I see them this year. Right now, I've got them behind Atlanta United in 10th, behind Orlando in ninth, and behind Columbus in eighth. Those are the types of teams that they're going to be competing against. I've got New England in 12th because I think while I don't think they're a playoff team yet, I do think they're going to be a bit better. But around the league, teams are getting
Hmm.
better. The league is getting better, and this is good for MLS, Luca.
Oh yeah, no, absolutely. I think it's the main thing of like a lot of people around the league kind of saying this is a transition season for Red Bull New York. It is a season of growth. It is a season of um, development in terms of obviously who our manager is, but also around the pitch and how we're um, how we as people who study the team are kind of analyzing um, this new era. Um, Definitely feels like you have to have higher hopes for the shortened season or the 2027-28. Um, but it's definitely the case of the Red Bulls not doing um, as much as some of these other teams are doing to compete in 2026 specifically. And that's something that's always, tends to be a frustration point for a lot of people who watch and follow the team. But yeah, ultimately good for the league that these other teams are really taking the jump. But it definitely feels like there's a separation for the teams that are really trying and the teams that are um, focused more on more of a long-term kind of plan. And that's kind of what happened when Julian Guzman took over. They mentioned it as like a long-term succession plan in terms of the way that they're envisioning not just the way that the club is being managed from the head of sport level to who's managing the first team and second team, um but how are they bringing in signings? Who are they targeting? It almost feels like the Sandro Schwartz, Jochen Schneider 2 year overlap is kind of a blip in the longer arc of this club. I think just bringing in Forsberg and Chupo felt like the club is finally bringing in more of this talent from Europe, and it kind of reverted back to the other way with the departures of Schneider and Schwartz. And so it'll be interesting, but I think it feels a lot more of a clear direction than there was even under a guy like Kevin Thewell, if I'm looking back, to 2020, 2019 through 2022. So I think the Guzman Bradley era feels firmly set enough where we can definitely expect to see growth with these guys, and hopefully not as much turnover as we've seen in the past 3 or 4 years.
And in a long-term project, you've got to start somewhere. And we're going to see the start of that tonight. Red Bull New York against Orlando City at Inter&Co Stadium, 7:30 p.m. kickoff on Apple TV. Luca Richman of the RBNY Experience, thank you so much for hopping on the show again. We'll see what this group is made of for the very first time in a match that we can actually watch. 90 minutes. And oh boy, I'm excited, but I have my reservations. Let's see what they're made of. Luca, thanks for jumping on. Thank you for watching and for previewing the season and this match, the first of many preview episodes on Empire Soccer Report. Take care, everybody.